One.
Okay, so this is September 22nd, 2007. You were born January 19th, 1930.
That is correct.
Right? Luling, Texas.
That is right.
Okay.
In the Brunner oil field of all names.
So what?
Brunner oil
Really?
field. Yeah, I never knew that someday that would get closer.
I
But
didn't either.
yeah, the oil field out of Luling, about 5 or 6 miles, the name of that field is Brunner.
Really?
Brunner oil
Any
field.
relation to Cliff and them at all? Or?
No, I don't think so.
So 1930. Now, of course, a lot of people don't know. You know, everybody knows you by Clyde Brewer. You're Clyde Brewer Jr.
That's right.
Your daddy was Clyde Brewer, married to Velma.
All right.
And now, was he musical at all?
He could whistle,
He could whistle.
kind of. But he loved it. Loved music and always encouraged me. But he didn't play anything.
Now, Mama played a little bit, right?
Mama played some. She traveled some before they were married with some gospel things and played piano and guitar and mandolin a little bit.
Mm.
She showed me the first thing on all three.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what's your recollection, the first time you can remember being drawn to music, liking music?
Well, we lived out in the country there in Luling, and like a lot of other people then, we had a old battery-powered radio, and I remember Daddy would turn on the Grand Ole Opry every Saturday night, or if the battery was out, you might go to somebody else's house, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. And
then I got to listen later on to bands out of San Antonio. I listened every day to the Tune Wranglers, and Adolph Hoffner was popular, and of course the Light Crust Doughboys. And I was way more interested in that than I was going across the street someplace and playing baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Was impressed by all the music, you know.
Yeah. So what was your first instrument?
Well, Mother started me out trying to show me something on the guitar, but my fingers were too short, and she showed me how to make G and D open chords, you know. And I couldn't reach C, and I'd cry about it. I couldn't make the C on there. My fingers wasn't long enough, so I'd cry about it. I couldn't reach that chord. So anyway, we went out to her mothers and daddies, my grandpa and grandma, and somebody there, Uncle Calvin, I think, had an old mandolin. So she had this mandolin, first one I'd seen, so she showed me a couple of chords on the mandolin. Well, I could reach that.
Mm-hmm.
So I got after that mandolin pretty good because I could reach everything that you wanted to. Then we bought an old piano from her sister, Aunt Florence, and she paid $12 for this piano.
Mm.
And me and my dad and a cousin went and hauled it in, and I played it all the way to Luling and beat on it on the back of a flatbed trailer.
Mm.
And we got that home, and she showed me some few chords on the piano, so that's why I kind of hooked into trying to play several different things, you know.
Now there was old fellow named J.C. around there, right? During that time?
Yeah. I guess the first drive-in that ever happened was what they call curb service, and the first one they had there in Luling, and maybe about once a month, Daddy and Mom and myself would go to this drive-in and pull in there, and the car hop would come out and put a tray on the window, and we'd get a Coca-Cola or something. And there was a black guy there, and his name was J.C., and he'd come up to the car playing black blues, they called it, you know, and he could play the guitar and sing, and man, I was impressed with J.C. playing that guitar and doing the blues. So we get home, and I got my guitar, and I wanted to change my name to J.C., and I mean, I pitched a fit. I didn't want to be Clyde Jr. no more. I wanted to be J.C. and play the blues like that on the guitar that I'd seen him do, you know. And we had a black guy that lived across the pasture from us, and he'd come over once in a while, and I'd get him in the house, and he'd play piano for me. He'd play the blues, you know. And once in a while, some of the kinfolks would have a July 4th or some occasion, they'd hire him to come to the house, and he'd sit out in the hall with a guitar and play, and they'd all be in there eating and telling. I'd be sitting out there with him, digging him, you know, impressed.
So when your son was born, you named him Joel Clyde, which is J.C., right?
That's right.
That have anything to do with it?
Well, it could have. Joel came along, and so I named him J.C. And
Well, he turned out to be a real good musician.
Yeah, it must work some kind of way.
Changed my initials.
That's his initials.
Yeah.
J.C.
Now, you had a little short oboe career, didn't you?
Yeah, it was very short. Luling School there, we had a band director, I believe, kind of ahead of his time, and he'd hear me there at school sometime before music class was starting. I'd be playing the piano and accompanying myself and singing. So he wanted to build a little orchestra in the school band. So he wanted to add a bassoon and an oboe and an upright bass, believe it or not, in the school band, which had to be unusual then.
Mm-hmm.
So he came to the house and he talked to Mom and Daddy. He said, I see Clyde there playing the piano and this and that. And so I believe he could learn to play an oboe. And we'd love to have one in that school band. That'd be very unusual. So at any rate, he talked them into going to Austin and buying me an oboe, which is, an oboe is to sound like you charm snakes with, you know, and it reeds this way out. Anyway, they went to Austin and bought an oboe for $40. And the reed for it sticks way out, it's not protected, and they were $1 every time you snag one. Well, a 9-year-old kid is not going to look after protecting that reed too much, you know. So I'd go to school and he'd start me lessons on this oboe, and then I'd come home and get in the other room and try to rehearse and to learn something on that horn. And my grandfather, he was a dyed-in-the-wool lover of fiddle music and guitar music, and I'd be in there and I'd hear him in the other rooms. I wish he'd put that damn oboe down and get that guitar, that fiddle. Anyway, that didn't last too long. I gave up on the oboe and got back on the strings, you know.
You wouldn't hardly play Billy and Low Ground on oboe, so.
No, it wasn't too appealing.
So you started actually playing some dances and stuff around Luling, didn't you?
Yeah, they back then you'd have an occasion, maybe somebody's birthday or holiday or something, and go out to the kinfolk's house and they'd take the furniture out of the room. And I had 2 cousins up there, 3 cousins, brothers that played, and Tiller. They were all Tillers. Lawson and Lloyd and Billy Tiller. And they played mandolin and guitars, you know, and I was real impressed with them. And they'd go out there and play with these people to dance or whatever, and they'd kind of let me sit over in the corner and plunk along on the mandolin with them. So, man, they'd play Down Yonder and Snow Deer and Little Pal and all those old songs, you know. And so, yeah, I actually started playing some of those house dances up there when I was about 9 or 10 years old.
And didn't you say there's some of the groups would have come through Luling and played there, you'd have seen them live, like Adolph Hoffman?
Yeah, well, what happened was a real popular group. They started in about 1935 out of San Antonio. There's on the radio there called the Tune Wranglers. And had a real good group, and I used to listen to them every day. So we was down in Gonzales, which is 20 miles from Luling, one weekend, visiting my dad's brother and sister-in-law. And the Tune Wranglers were playing at a place called the Roof Garden there in Gonzales. It's up on top of a building. It was out in open air, in other words, actually on the roof. So they said, we'll go up there and hear the Tune Wranglers. And they're having a big dance, man, a big crowd. So we got up there, and my aunt, she walked up to the band and told them about me, how about letting me sing a song. And man, I was impressed with that. And they said, yeah, sure, come on, you know. So I got up there and they lifted me over this rail, put me on this chair, put me up front of the microphone, first one I'd ever seen. And I sang the Tune Wranglers. I guess I was about 6 or 7 years old. Sang a song called What's the Reason I'm Not Pleasing You. So,
Do you remember some of the musicians?
no, I read about them later, who they were, but at that time I probably knew. Don't remember all of them names. They were real popular, and of course, like you say, Adolph Hoffner, he came through Luling. Daddy took me to see Adolph Hoffner, and then about 38 or 39, well, W.O. Daniels came through there with the Black Crust Doughboys, well, his group he was campaigning to be governor. And I think everybody in Luling and Caldwell County was there, and I was, and they played on a flatbed truck about right across from where the Luling City Market is. And little did I know some of the guys in that band I'd be playing with in not very many years.
Like some of the names?
Well, Clyde Brewer was in the band, and they had Leon Huff and several girls. I played with Cliff a lot, as you know. And
what year would that have been?
that'd been about 38 or 39. Yeah, he went on to be governor, of course. Then you can listen to him on the radio. They broadcast from the Capitol weekly.
So pretty much you just played little house dances, stuff like that around Luling. There wasn't nothing really professional or anything yet.
No,
there.
no.
Now, y'all left Luling to go to Beaumont, right?
Yeah, what happened was the war started in 41, and my dad had lost his job, so there wasn't much going around Luling. So Beaumont and all down through there in East Texas and Port Arthur, it was booming, you know, kind of the war, that shipyard and refinery. So in 42, we moved to Beaumont. And I had been down there, before we moved, I'd been down there about 3 months before, visiting my mother's sister, and I was listening to the radio to see if there was any bands in Beaumont, and I heard this little band playing on the radio station in Beaumont called Patsy and the Buckaroos. And I was listening to them, you know, and I said, I could play with that. I could play with them. And I didn't know, but in a few months we moved down there to Beaumont. And a little place out on College Street where the Baptist Hospital is now, was called Playland Park. It was just a regular year-round carnival that stayed there all the time. And Patsy and the Buckaroos, lo and behold, was playing out there for entertainment. They had chairs out in front of this big old bandstand. So we moved to Beaumont, and I started school there. So Mom and Daddy took me down there on the weekend, and sure enough, there was Patsy and the Buckaroos. And I don't know who went up and told them, but I'd done been playing in the school some, so somebody went up there and told them that I could play and sing. So they called me up there, and they had a mandolin, gave me the mandolin, and I sang Star Spangled Banner Waving Somewhere or something like that. At any rate, then the following weekend they invited me back. So after a few weekends, I got going pretty good up there. Well, they hired me to come up there every Friday and Saturday and play with them. They'd give me $1 a night and get to ride all the rides free.
And what year would that have been?
That would have been about 1942.
So you're about 12 years old.
Yeah, about 42. Yeah. And you get to ride all the rides free. And of course, all the kids from school would come up there, and I had a whole bunch of girlfriends, not because of me, but they could ride the rides free. See if they was making out like.
Get free ride.
Oh yeah, free ride.
Ride with Clyde.
That's it. Yeah, that's about right. Anyway, they had a radio program every day, and when I wasn't in school, I'd go down and be on the radio program. And then on Saturday, sometime they'd but I had become a regular member of the group, and they'd have amateurs come in there. And in fact, the first time I ever saw Billy Carter was on that show. One day he was down there, and he wanted to sing on the show, and he was real shy, believe it or not, little kid, and he was about 2 years younger than me. And he played the guitar and sang some song. That's the first time I ever met Billy. And then he kind of just vanished, and then we got together some years later. But we'd play Land Park thing, and with Patsy and the Buckaroos. Now,
Patsy Buckaroos was who? Who all was in that?
Well, it was Patsy. She was the singer and guitar player and leader, and that's who the name was built around. And her dad, Pop, they called him, Patsy and Pop. He built instruments and little amplifiers and stuff, and he kind of hit everybody on that. Built a one-string solid electric bass. I know that was before Fender, but just had one string on it, they'll kind of work you to death. You had to stand up in a chair. But anyway, I'd go out there and appear with them, and had a guy in the band, his name called himself Cowboy Carl. So there was 2 guitars and this instrument that Pop invented called the octaphone. Which had a kind of weird sound. And anyway, I was playing mandolin with them and guitar. And we played out there. And so you want to get into your dad's?
Yeah, before that, there was a time early on there, I remember you telling me, where I think your daddy took it. Ready? Okay, now there's a time early on there in Beaumont, I remember you telling me about your dad taking you out where Cliff was playing.
Yeah, what it was, just starting out there with Patsy and the Buckaroos, a little bit before that, well, I got to listen to the radio programs in Beaumont of bands, you know, and there was a band in Beaumont, they were about #1 called Poncho and the Farmhands, and they were on there on KRIC every day. I didn't know any of those guys, and I'd listen to them, and then shortly after that I turned it over to KPAC Port Arthur, and boy, I heard something that sounded good to me, and it turned out to be Cliff Brunner and the Showboys. And boy, it'd been the best thing I'd heard over there. So at any rate, we lived in a place called Bluebird Court out on College Street in Beaumont. And there was an old gentleman there named Mac Millen, and he dealt in horses and mules and kind of a horse trader, I guess you'd say, and he was in Fort Worth. And around the courts there, well, I kind of known is they'd get me to come down and play, and I'd go down with my guitar and play for the old man, this and that. So finally one day he said, you know, said, I'm from Fort Worth, and he said, I used to go up there and visit with Milton Brown and the Brownies, and he said, tonight out at the Winter Garden, he said, Cliff Bruner, who was a fiddle player, and the show boys are playing out there, would you like me to take you out there? And I thought, oh man, I'd love to do that. He said, well, go ask your mother and daddy if I'll take you out to the Winter Garden tonight where Cliff Bruner's playing. So I did, and they said sure. So we go out, biggest hall I'd ever seen, and it was out on Port Arthur Highway, and went in there and had a big crowd and everything. And there was Cliff Bruner and the band up on the bandstand. First time I'd ever seen them, but I'd been listening to them. So